Blingy matching designer.
ये है मास्क
95% filtration, 5 layers, BIS certified.
ये है बड़े काम का मास्क नया सेवलॉन मास्क सिर्फ 95 रुपीस में
Welcome to Expressions. We're doing a special series on COVID, and I have with me one of India's premier cardiologists, Dr. Ashok Seth. This is brought to you by the New Indian Express in Savlon. Dr. Ashok Seth, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're very, very busy in the thick of things. The second wave has really hit us so badly, and I think nobody as badly as doctors. I think you've discovered so much about this disease over the past year. It has surprised you, foxed you, as it has the rest of the world. How has this journey been, Dr. Seth, since we spoke to you last? So many things have. It's been such a tragic time. How have you been coping?
It's good to be talking to you about this, Kaveriji. It's been a traumatic experience. In a way, it's been a very different experience. Let me just say that it's been now a year and 3 months since we've been combating the virus. Initially, I must say that because of the lockdowns and because of what was happening around us and because what we were seeing in the West happening, remember, it hadn't happened in our country. Every visual of the number of people, the public getting sick, requiring oxygen, requiring ventilation, the long queues, even the number of deaths were actually visuals from Italy, from Britain, from America.
Right.
And though that was the time we were in lockdown. And so it frightened us, but it wasn't a personal experience. It was happening somewhere else. And then gradually it started happening in our country when we started people feeling sicker and actually experiencing the disease, and some of them succumbing to the disease. But we must remember the last wave which happened was very different to what we saw this time. Yes, a number of patients at that time for mild disease who got admitted more for isolation than for treatment, and a few of them got sick and very few succumbed. I think the viciousness of the disease process, what we saw this time, the surge, its infectivity, the infrastructure getting overwhelmed, our helplessness, people who could not be admitted, ringing us up regularly, people who we knew, our patients, their relatives, our own relatives, some of our friends, and actually sick patients requiring admissions and not getting admitted was an extremely disappointing, dejecting, traumatic, horrifying experience for every doctor. So if you were to ask me my experiences, there are only two aspects of it. One, that of fighting it aggressively on the past 1 year and giving us everything, our sacrifices, but there was no disappointment, there was no dejection, there was no fear, till the last 2 months, where we saw people succumbing to it for lack of facilities, for something that we could not do for them, for areas where we would have liked to do more but were helpless. And that was far more traumatic morally, psychologically, than anything that we'd experienced before. It was alien. We were never trained to experience or not to be able to do anything for a person.
Right.
And yes, we were like an army where we didn't have the necessary ammunition to fight an enemy, and we saw our near and dear ones dying. When I say near dear ones, our patients dying, and us just saying, God, please help him, because I don't see how I can help him any further.
Right, and that's so tragic because at one stage, this really the pandemic is also a triumph of science in the sense that vaccines have become available so quickly for the entire world. We've not had such a quick vaccine rollout anywhere. But at the same time, there's also did you feel that there was a failure of science, that you felt that as a doctor, everything that you were trained to do, you had all your abilities, but you were not able to do anything.
Yeah. I would say there are, again, I would firstly express myself in a manner that while we've been trained as doctors to not get too emotionally attached to a patient
Right.
so that we can comfort the patient.
Yeah.
If we start feeling the same pains, then we may not be able to comfort the patient. We may not be able to give confidence to the patient
Right.
or the relatives, though the pain is being felt inside, but we have to have a demeanor
Right.
of still being confident and still be telling the patient, we'll get over all this, we'll get you better. And therefore, there were two aspects of to what we were doing. On one hand, trying to keep that cool with the patient, with the behavior, with
Right.
the empathy, and with care, but still giving the confidence, though inside our own hearts, we are actually pretty deeply dejected and depressed our own selves. And yet we have to carry this mantle for our own juniors because
Yeah.
remember, we've been in it for a long period of time. We have seen death, we have seen illnesses, we've tried to make patients better, and we've seen failures. But our juniors haven't. They've been only taught to, and they don't know how to absorb it, and
Right.
neither how to convey it to the patient or to the relatives, and now and to take their hurt home,
Right.
and that's also not very good. So I think we had a lot of responsibility in these times. But now coming to this very important aspect as to what it taught us,
Yeah.
and believe you me, I think that uh, over the last 40 years, over the last 50 years especially, medical science has grown immensely in
Yeah.
terms of management, in terms of treatment, in terms of cure, in terms of believing that it is curing, and in terms of allaying illnesses. There's no question.
Right.
But on the same fact, one would say that advancements in science, advancements in technology, advancements in medicine, most of it which happened in 20th century, you can only see that for yourself. It was only in 1932 that perhaps even a computer came in. 1942 a box-like computer came
Yeah.
in, and in another 40 years there was a world wide web. a,
Right.
a man got onto a plane and flew it for 100 feet in 1904, the Wright brothers, and by 1969 man had landed on the moon.
We were on the moon.
On
Yeah.
the moon. So you can see how much technology
Yeah.
progressed in just one century,
Right.
which had never happened before for many, many centuries.
Right.
Now, that actually made human beings, and I say human beings, always believed that we were gods. We dominated this earth we were supposed to live in. We became the superior being, but we
Right.
also started believing that we gave lives. And then while everything was going fine, why we thought we were actually one over nature, one over any other being which lived on the planet, perhaps winning over anything that we could see,
Right.
one submicroscopic,
A little little.
microscopic, which is not even a living being, which is arguably doesn't even have a DNA, it only has an RNA, and therefore may not be even a live particle, just showed the humankind that it could be stopped in its track.
Right.
Everything which it had actually done before could actually be wiped out. We saw a year and a half of what we never even dreamt of. We
Yeah.
have thought of viruses, we knew about viruses. We said, this happened somewhere there in a small part.
Right.
Maybe the MERS happened, maybe SARS happened somewhere in Asia,
Right.
maybe the Ebola happened somewhere in Africa. But could it ever change our lives? Could it ever change our thinking? Could it ever change the way we live, we behave, we interact, we look at the future? And it actually blew up everything
Yeah.
into a new reality for humankind. And what does it teach us? Firstly, it brought more people to introspect,
Right.
didn't it? I mean, all of us had time to introspect. All of us had time to look upon ourselves, look upon what we've done, look upon how we've looked at things, but also importantly, it actually made a lot more people spiritual,
Yeah.
which is correct. That's how we should have lived our lives.
Yeah.
We should be more spiritual. And rather than believing that science itself had become God, we
Right.
had to combine science with spirituality. We had to combine science with humility. We had to combine with science with fragility of our own beings and our own living.
Right.
We had to combine science with empathy, with compassion, with care. But we'd forgotten all that. We combined science with haughtiness, with superiority, with the
Right.
grandeur, with how great human beings we are. And that is what it taught us. It taught us science and spirituality have to coexist. We've got to start living not on the earth. We've got to start living on the world. We've got to coexist with, firstly, amongst ourselves. We've got to
Right.
forget our differences. We've got to live with each other. And then we've got to live with everything that we see around, be it
Right.
birds, be it plants, be it animals, and be it viruses, bacteria. After all, we have to coexist, and we've got to find a good means of coexistence on this earth. And that is what means living on this world. So it truly taught us that we are a small being in the whole plan of God. And if we go beyond ourselves, someone somewhere will believe that we can actually be put into position, we can be destroyed also as a human race.
Right.
And that is what is happening. We're
Yeah.
close to destruction,
Absolutely.
disruption and destruction in many ways, in a scenario which has never been seen, and we hope we'll never see in our lives. Having said that, I think we'd also got one thing together. It also showed us that humanity and humankind can get together to forget differences and forget those petty egos across the world, forget those distinctions of religious lines, distinction of borders, distinction of many other issues and politics, and get together to say, can we get together to work together for science, for humanity, for actually existence, and for preserving lives?
Right.
Be it vaccinations, be
Yeah.
it creating vaccinations, be it creating drugs, be it forgetting those boundaries and saying, how do these drugs get, or vaccines, drugs, etc., go across the world?
Right.
Science progresses in one end, gets transferred across the world very rapidly for the same purpose. And that was, I think, another aspect. And that's why we saw vaccines come up so rapidly.
Right.
Because everybody put their minds together. It was fast track. And the fast track was not just because everything just became faster. Minds got together, science and research got together. It crossed boundaries very easily. And therefore,
The
exchange
public and private organizations got together. It wasn't
Oh.
just everyone got together, right?
You brought up such an important point, and I shouldn't have missed that. You're so right, at least in our own countries, where the private healthcare providers have been such an integral part of delivering care in this country for the time since medicine came into India, and yet have been considered as outliers or blamed,
Exactly.
or people to be blamed, or to be sat across the table, or to be looked at with suspicion, and
Or
to be
as profiteers.
and all sorts of beating boys, should we say, or whipping boys, has been
Right.
private healthcare providers, always to be blamed for anything which happens in healthcare delivery in our country. And yet, we know that we've delivered well in the past, but this was shoulder to shoulder, taking complete responsibility, not looking at the costs and the benefits and the profits, going by whatever directives of the government there came in terms of, be it the cost of the beds, be it in the number of the beds, be it in converting the whole hospital into COVID hospitals, be it giving up care of other patients who were non-COVID, who really needed our care. All those were given up for one single factor. We had one single enemy. We had one agenda. We were shoulder to shoulder with the nation. We were a part of the nation. We had to actually crush this enemy, and there was no differentiation in whatever we did. So I think the frontline healthcare workers, be it from public and private, joined together immensely to fight this disease process. Till today, till now, even as I sit today, it is the same. We don't see a differentiation. We see only one enemy. That enemy is the virus, and that has to go away. And that's our single agenda for any healthcare provider. But it brings me to another important point, that doctors and nurses, unfortunately, have to be cared for. We must
Yeah.
tell you that in those PPEs, and maybe I know that you haven't asked me this question, but it's still an integral part of fighting this battle, and maybe I could say it to you. Wearing that PPE
Yeah.
in the heat, in the sweat, for 12 hours on a slog, without
Absolutely.
even going to the bathrooms, very little to every time you have to drink water, you can't take the PPE. So you either exist without water or go in one corner, just open the mask for a bit to actually get a gulp of water and to believe that maybe this time the virus won't infect yourself. And then doing everything for the patient, providing him the comfort while fearing that one could get infected with the virus, and just forgetting that fear,
Right.
resuscitating patients knowing that that aerosol could also infect you, going back and doing the same thing over and over again for a few days, going to then into an isolation and not seeing a family for a whole month just because you could not take that home to your family, always worrying that your family could catch it off you, and maybe you've already given it to your family,
Right.
but saying one thing: we've got to save lives.
Right.
And then you get appreciated occasionally by, yes, by our leaders, yes, which is very nice. But does the public really understand what you're doing in all these sacrifices? Because unfortunately, on one day, yes, they beat the drums and
Right.
they beat everything and the gongs in your praises. But another day, with the same danda, they come and beat you up because you couldn't take care of one of their close relatives, and you just could not do that because you were actually inundated with the same patients. There was no oxygen, which was not your fault. There was no beds, which wasn't your fault. You still went out of the emergency and saved two more lives. And you were inundated with patients, and it was no fault that there were less doctors, less beds, less oxygen, less drugs. And yet you were the one who got beaten up as a doctor, as a nurse. And at the same time, a few doctors gave up their lives for the sake of the fact that they were so depressed and so dejected because they couldn't save lives, that they gave up their lives. They decided that it was not worth living if you couldn't save lives. In those times, and in these present times, I would say our only strongest and greatest resource is to think about those doctors and those nurses who day after day slog hard, risking their own lives to save lives. I will tell you a real happening where an anesthetist who was struck with COVID in an ICU while on an oxygen, when there was a cardiac arrest on the next bed, took his oxygen off, resuscitated that patient even though he was himself gasping,
God.
and then gave up his gig. And then he himself didn't survive 2 days later, but he made sure that the patient next to him survived. You saw our great illustrious doctor, Dr. K.K. Agarwal,
Right.
who taught so many people around this country how to save patients, how to treat COVID patients, who taught so many doctors, who gave so many sermons to patients how to take care of themselves. Even at the time when he himself had COVID with oxygen, he continued to believe that if 1,000 people, if 2,000 people, if 5,000 people, if 10,000 people saw even 1 hour of his video, he would perhaps save those 10,000 lives, which was worth more than his 1 hour of his suffering. That is the purpose or the mission of the doctors. And yet, when we go on to saying what is it do we need for a third wave, and I was asked this, I said, what have you actually, what is the infrastructure do you believe we need to prevent a third wave? And I said, we may need beds, we may need oxygen, we may need doctors, we may need number of doctors. But do you know what we need most? We need the morale of the doctors.
Yeah.
We need the morale of the nurse. If you can build up that morale of the nurses and the doctors, then we provided the infrastructure we need to fight the third wave. But
Right.
if we actually do away with that morale of the doctors, of the nurses, if we stop caring for them, if we actually stop caring for their families, if we don't show our respect, our love, affection for the doctors, they are our most important resources. We cannot take our nurses and doctors for granted. The morale is coming down just to watch those patients dying, especially in the last wave. The morale as it's its lowest if they are not, if we don't bring up their morale. And we have to do that. We have to take care of them. They're the most important resources that we have to fight this battle for the future. And I think if we do that, we will continue to win this battle. I've got no doubts that we'll drive this virus away. I've got no doubts.
Right.
I think humankind has got together with enough of its intelligence and togetherness to be able to beat this virus. But we still have to look at many aspects, and that we have to do it together, and we have to shelve all differences and actually just have one agenda.
Right. Doctor, if I know we're running out of time, but if I could just ask you quickly, what are the 4 or 5 things that you feel are absolutely essential that need to be done in the next 6 months? Time is of critical essence. We really need to get this over with before it destroys any more people. What do we absolutely need to do?
See, in our own country, one thing we absolutely need as a start is to forget the differences between the various political parties,
Right.
the states and the center, and agree that at least give us this time that for the foreseeable future, till this virus becomes dormant, we've beaten the virus, we're just going to we're going to work together and forget petty politics, forget differences, forget blame games, forget allegations. And that goes for all, whether it's politics, whether it's state versus center, whether
Right.
it is private versus public, whatever.
Right. Right.
Let's forget all our differences. We only got one. We are at war. We got one enemy. All of us are in this together,
Right.
irrespective of state, religion, boundaries, irrespective of political parties, political ideologies, nothing. We need to we need to believe in that. Once we believe in that, we have clearly four issues in front of us. COVID appropriate behavior has to stay and is going to stay for the next couple of years. Let's just believe that that's the way we live.
Right.
And secondly, if we mask ourselves and double mask ourselves, if we make sure that we don't have unnecessary gatherings,
Right.
therefore distancing, and make sure sanitization, we will win over this virus, provided we also vaccinate ourselves.
Yeah.
So if we have this 4 agenda, but I must also tell you why it's important. See, I may say, I don't want to wear a mask because I don't care, I may catch a virus.
Yeah.
And I don't even worry whether I survive or not. That may be my intention, or that may be, but there is no reason that legally, morally, I'm bound to take care of others.
Right.
If I don't wear a mask, it's not that I get hurt. I'm going to hurt somebody
Other
else.
people. Exactly.
I'm actually going to hurt somebody else. I'm going to hurt per person who I meet. I'm actually going to be passing on that virus. And if I don't take care, unfortunately, that could be my family, and that certainly could be my parents, and some of them may not survive. And if we do that, we are either morally wrong, we are certainly socially wrong, but I can tell you, we are legally wrong, because there's no, you may want to punish yourself, you may want to do anything to your own self. There is no way you can harm others in a civilized country. There is no way you can do that. So I totally believe that that is absolutely legally wrong if you're not going to follow COVID appropriate behavior. And finally, vaccination. I believe that this country can vaccinate its own 70% of its population in a few weeks' time, provided we had the vaccines. And let me just to give you all a food for thought. If we're a country which can actually make 70% of its population vote in a period of a few days.
Exactly.
It takes less time to take a vaccination than to go and give a vote. There's less screening for vaccination than for giving a vote. There's no police protection needed at the vaccination booths as is needed for the voting booths. There is nobody who's going to break the line a second time to take a second dose of vaccination right then, as it's seen in the vaccination booths. And there's no reason we can't have vaccination booths every 500 meters from our home.
That's true.
When we've been vaccinated by our own GP every day of our lives since we were born, many times in our lives since we were born.
Yeah.
And finally, every healthcare worker, every medical student can actually give vaccination.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have those 200 crore doses from August onwards, believe you me, there is no reason we can't vaccinate all the people. So I was just thinking, if they got the Election Commission of India, who does
Yeah.
everything so seamlessly,
Fascinating.
why can't we have a COVID Vaccination Commission of India, a one-stop shop, who
Right.
gets us the vaccination from anywhere in the world, who decides the pricing, who just creates the logistics of acquisition and distribution, who makes giving vaccination very simple. After all, drive-in vaccinations are being done all across the world, and they're now
Right.
coming to India, but they're all across the world. The vaccinations don't need large centers with people queuing in.
Yeah.
Actually, the vaccinations should come to you rather than you going to
Who
a
going to the vaccination? Yeah.
vaccination center. And there is a Vaccination Commission of India could
Right.
actually just assure vaccination in a few weeks' time to 70% of the Indian population. So it's not such a big deal.
That's such an important suggestion. I do hope someone takes it up, because it's such a simple but brilliant idea, isn't it? If we can conduct elections, as you said, why can't we do this?
It's absolutely correct. Just
Right.
empower a body to be
Right.
able to control and coordinate and execute it, and it'll be
Right.
done. Then it finishes. It's an unbiased body which finishes the state versus center issues. It finishes the various politicking issues. It finishes the issues of acquisition, costing, pricing, delivery. It becomes a simplified process, and to achieve this, it has to be a simplified process.
Right. I mean, I think we can't end on a better and more hopeful note. Thank you so much. And this is such a brilliant.
Can I just have one more minute to end on a more positive note?
Wonderful. We need all the positivity.
I keep thinking of this, and I keep saying, people always this gets me. Oh, we got to live with this. This is the new norm. This is how we're going to live. This is how we're going to keep separated. This is how we're not going to mix. This is how we wear masks. And this is the new norm. And I said, please don't call it the new norm. Just call it the new abnormal. because how can we believe that we're going to live the rest of our lives like this? I mean, what is the norm? The norm is where we were able to actually, and let's look forward to the norm, I say.
Right.
Maybe it's not here today. Maybe it's not here this year. Maybe it's here tomorrow. But if we work together, and if we follow what we said, if we follow all the COVID appropriate behavior, if we get vaccinated, then we'll get to the norm. And what we've got to do that is we've got to look forwards to those days where we used to go out and eat, to those days where we used to have birthday parties for our children. The norm is when you actually celebrate the birthday of your aging parents and get your whole family and distant family together to enjoy yourself. Norm is when your children say, let's go for a picnic. And you say, yeah, let's go for a picnic and let's go out and let's go shopping, or let's go into a museum and watch all that. That's norm. Or you say, let's go for a holiday. That's norm. Norm is when you sit together, have fun, enjoy with your family, go to work, be together and live a life. And if you want to get to that norm, let's be together in fighting the virus today. Let's live that abnormal life. Let's live that new abnormality so that in 1 year, in 2 years, we get to the norm. Don't call this the norm.
Right. Wonderful words. Thank you so much, Doctor, for your time and for your positivity of the right kind. That's also a word that has all sorts of connotations now. But thank you so much for your time. All the very best in your fight against this really vicious disease.
Wonderful talking to you. It's a wonderful talking to you. We hope we beat this virus, and I'm sure we'll see a better future for all of us.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Blingy matching designer.
ये है mask.
95% filtration, 5 layers, BIS certified.
ये है बड़े काम का मास्क. नया Savlon मास्क सिर्फ 95 रुपीस में.